online. Where's my stream? Facebook's on. Bang, bang, bang. Facebook's on. Twitch. Come on, YouTube. You can do it. YouTube, you're online. Who's out there? Anybody out there in the world? Good morning. Got a few seconds before we hit the clock. Hits down to 7:30. Wednesday, we got our pirate shirt on. Morning, Alex. We're getting ready to go. Getting ready. Wednesday morning. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Alex, you're out there. It's good to see you in the morning. Good to get things going. Always a good time when we get together. So, we got a ton going on in the news. There's a bunch of stuff going on with the U.S. government. House is changing the way that we're looking at CISA. We've talked about CISA a lot. Alex, thank you for the tip for yesterday's broadcast. Right on time. That thing was right on time. Wells Fargo's putting some bans on some software. There's a Microsoft DNS attack out there that you need to patch. It's coming up. It's all wrapped up in Patch Tuesday. And there's just a super fast chunk of ransomware out there that we're going to talk about this morning. So let's roll the intro. We'll roll our little lead in, and then we'll jump into talking about what's going on today in our world of cyber. Let's jump in and get our cup of cyber. Good morning. Yeah, July 15th. It is July 15th, isn't it? It is 15th, yeah. Why are you on July 15th? Yeah, it is July 15th, right? I think it's the 15th. Next on, I think it's the 15th. That's why we're on the 15th. Tax day here in the U.S. Was extended, of course, through the summer. So we got a lot going on. Our cup of coffee's in Boston this week, or today. Not this week, but today we got our illy coffees in Boston. Getting us going. Rough night last night. Some stuff going on with the doggos. Got to get them taken care of. So, got to keep us going. But let's jump in and start talking about the news. There was a ton going on from when we left off yesterday, about 7:30 or so, when I stopped, about 7:15 when I stopped the feed looking at what's going on, until this morning. Man, there's a ton of news out there. And like I always say, we are, I don't know if people are just rehashing the news. Probably. It's probably just a rehash of the news. There's a lot of stuff on the news today that we've talked about last week and earlier. Good morning, Tammany. Good morning. Good to see you. Always good to see the locals. The crew that's always here. I think we got a solid cyber crew that just always shows up to pilot this cup of cyber frigate through the charted and deadly waters of cybersecurity. Keeping each other going, keeping each other moving forward. Just a good group of all hands on deck for the cyber crew, I think. So, right off the top, we're going to jump in. NextGov has an article out a couple days ago, actually. There's a proposal for a new office that would help private entities and governments respond together to major hacks. It's from the for the Office of Joint Cyber Planning, proposed an amendment to the 2021 Defense Policy Bill that aims to help government and private actors respond more quickly to cyber attacks mounted from state-sponsored attackers like Russia, China, North Korea, those folks. In a quote, The office shall lead government-wide and public-private planning for cyber defense campaigns, including the development of a set of coordinated actions to respond to and recover from significant cyber incidents. And that's from the amendment. The amendment will also give $15 million, will allocate $15 million to stand up the office as part of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Of course, my least favorite title of any organization. And again, that's the CISA, that's the government organization, not the CISA that's a certification. Yeah, 15 million is not a lot to set up an office. Yeah, the stand up office. So it's money going out there to set this up. It's more beyond the money. It's more for the coordination of response. And this reminds me of after September 11th, 9/11, when there was this massive re-coordination of activities within the intelligence community, because there were so many things going on that the FBI knew was going on, that the CIA knew was going on, the NSA knew was going on. There was all this intelligence out there, but it wasn't coordinated. And that's kind of what this thing's doing, saying we don't have that same intelligence community infrastructure where everybody's a government agency, but we do have all these people that are doing different things that are related to cyber, that have different views of it, and sometimes those private sectors have an earlier view of the attack than the government, and sometimes the government has an earlier piece of it than the private sector. So this is kind of bringing it all together. The article goes on to say, take, for example, the DNC, or the Democratic National Committee hack, or its convention, committee, hack of 2016. The U.S. government may have known as early as 2015 about the Russians' presence on servers belonging to the Democratic National Committee. The cybersecurity company CrowdStrike spotted unusual activity on those servers in May 2016, but it wasn't until July 2018, nearly 2 years after the release of information stolen from the DNC, that NSA announced the formation of a special group to counter aggressive Russian cyber activities. So they're saying it's kind of the same thing. We knew a lot of stuff was going on. We saw a lot of IOCs, what we call IOCs, indicators of compromise, different places. We saw exploitation of these servers by Russia. We saw unusual activity. We saw all these things early on. So it's really, part of this bill is just bringing that together. Rieber, so where we talk about Rieber here. So Jonathan Rieber is the director of cyber strategy at Attack IQ. I was trying to find where his current title is, because he was the former chief strategy officer for the Secretary of Defense, but now he's over at Attack IQ. So Rieber has written that better coordination isn't just important for private entities looking to protect themselves, but also the U.S. government. It's going to live up to the idea of proactive cybersecurity in the face of Russian, Chinese, and other threats, an approach that Cyber Command is calling defending forward. That's their quote for this thing, defending forward. There has to be, Rieber goes on to say, there has to be a level of integration between the Department of Defense and those companies, because the Department of Defense is the only agency that has the authority to conduct operations abroad to blunt and block incoming attacks. So the onus falls on Cyber Command to do that, but the Cyber Command is going to struggle with it because the cyber mission force is still growing and maturing, and also adversaries can use multiple components of infrastructure all over the world to conduct an operation. Rieber continues to say the government would have to ask private sector for help, so there has to be this kind of joint planning office. It really should focus on building up voluntary combined operations, which is different from the government demanding the private sector do something through a mandate. And this it's an important move forward when we think about this. In the past, we've seen things like the Critical Infrastructure Protection Acts and different requirements from NIST that says if you're in one of these sectors, if you're in one of these types of industry, then you've got to do something. We see this in financials with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC demanding things be done, certain types of security be put in place. We see it in healthcare with HIPAA demanding that certain controls be put in place. And then we see it in critical infrastructure where certain requirements are levied against critical infrastructure. This is really not saying the government is standing on high, passing down these edicts. This is saying we need to work together. You guys know stuff. We know stuff. Let's get together in these fusion centers and determine what's going on. It's really a dramatic step forward. This is really what we have to do, because for a long time the government was leading security, and this is back in the days of InfoSec and prior to that. That's not the case anymore. Sometimes these intelligence sources, sometimes these cybersecurity firms, and even private sector organizations see things way before the government sees it. So to get together and say, okay, U.S. government, you're going to have a role in this. You're going to kind of lead this thing. You're going to have the office set up. You're going to kind of coordinate it all. But let's bring private sector in. Let's bring professionals from the cyber world in. Another important point they make out here, and this is why we have the Cyber Command logo over there, is Cyber Command kind of is the center of this thing. So it looks like, if we go back up to the statement where they make the Cyber Command is the only one that can blunt these attacks, right? The only one that really stop these attacks. That's a pretty powerful statement to be in this bill. That's saying, this kind of defend forward thought. We're going to look at, if we see an attack, if we can coordinate where an attack's coming from. It looks like this kind of reading between the lines in my mind says Cyber Command will be able to go out there and kind of stop that. And maybe that's that, offensive action, offensive strategy to be what they call now dynamic defense. Really not don't want to call it an offensive strategy, but it's dynamic defense. So if we see these attacks coming in, we can blunt them. We can push them back with some type of tools and techniques and procedures, or TTPs, from DoD Cyber Command. So it's a definite linking in of Cyber Command into this thing. Another thing that is we know it's true across all of cyber. I think this year alone, 2020, we're like 2 million or close to 2 million cyber professionals short. We don't have enough. And that's what they're saying here in this article as well, from NextGov. It is just they're trying to stand up Cyber Command. Cyber Command is not staffed yet. They don't have the cyber professionals to really do the job yet. And I fear this is going to be a growing and continuing trend. Being former military, I know how this works. If you are in a job, and let's say you're a cyber analyst for Cyber Command, and you're in the Army, it would be a PFC, like an E3 or a specialist in E4, and you're working there, and you're doing your job, you're well skilled. They're going to have to train these guys up. Guys being gender neutral, of course. So they have to train these people up to do the cyber job. They're going to have to be trained to do what they need to do to blunt these attacks. Well, if the private sector is 2 million cyber people short, and that's going to continue to grow as we increase our reliance on integrated technologies, the Internet of Things and driverless cars, all these technologies that continue to grow in the private sector, there's going to be a continued demand for cyber professionals. That's just a supply and demand. We're already 2 million short, and we keep putting new technologies out there. That's only going to increase the need for qualified cyber professionals. So as they get trained up in the military, maybe they get to the rank of E4 in whichever service they're in. It's going to be really hard to retain these folks past that initial enlistment. And maybe the initial enlistment is 4 or 6 years, maybe it's 6 years, maybe they extend it a little bit because of the type of training they're going to get. Even at 4 or 6 years, you're going to have a mass exodus at that point to go to the private sector, just because there is such a lucrative market for that skill set. Um, let alone on the officer side of the house. I think about the officers that are coordinating and managing all this. A huge demand for these folks. So I imagine that in Cyber Command, in these critical roles that are needed, that they're trying to staff up now, you're going to see an exodus at like probably the E3, E4 level on the enlisted side, and probably about the O3 level on the officer side of the house, where people just are leaving to go work in the private sector. So that's a bunch of stuff packed into the article. NextGov, of course, it's in the show notes below. We always like to put them there so you can read more about these, because I don't cover everything in it, but really this is a big piece of legislation. It's a big this proposed policy, this bill really could change things quite a bit. So that's that one. That's what's going on with that one. We're going to kind of tie that back in here in a minute, but it's crazy, this. And I think they're way off. $15 million to stand up the office as part of CISA. Gotta wash my mouth out after saying that, but that's not a lot of money to stand up an office. It really isn't. When we think about, and I know when you sit here and think, wow, $15 million is a lot of money, and to me it is personally. Obviously that's a ton of money. I would love to have $15 million, but we're talking about standing up an office, a nationwide office that's going to respond to global events, and they're cyber events. So, I don't know. That seems short to me. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are. I'm gonna drink a cup of Illy real quick. That just seems like not a ton of money. But that's why that's why we're all here. That's part of the job we're all in is. That's why we stay on top of things, is defending these things, is protecting the realms that we're guarding. We're out there good fight every day, hopefully keeping everybody pumped up to do this, and maybe play a role in the development of this thing as we go on. Depending on where you're at, if you're in the private sector now, if you're in the government now, there's the opportunity coming, hopefully, 2021, 2022, for some interaction. It's going to be a little weird, though. One thing it doesn't talk about in this article, in the government to be working on this type of strategy, you're going to need some type of clearance, secret or more likely probably top secret, when working about these types of strategy and this type of attack information. That would mean that folks on the civilian side would have to get tooled up and get cleared as well, so they can work with the same type of information. That those information protection requirements aren't going to change. So probably going to see cleared positions in the private sector. Again, that's a double-edged sword, though. I know several people that won't leave the government because they have to maintain their clearance. So if now there's positions in the private sector that are more lucrative and they'll be able to maintain their clearance, this might be again, a double-edged sword. So more to come. I mean, this is just starting. This is a bill still. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of changes to it as it moves forward. Plenty of riders added onto it. But it's interesting to see what changes this could make in 2021, 2022, 2023. Definitely this coordination between public and private is needed. We got to do it. Just like we did after 9/11, we had to do it. In the intelligence community, we had to bring all those intelligence feeds together. Now we need to bring these feeds between public and private back together. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. Where Conti ransomware. There we go. So many things in the news this morning. So Conti, and sometimes I mess these names up, so you got to forgive me on that. This is a ransomware that's a little different than normal ransomware, right? This is a little bit different, and it's a lesser known strain because of the differences it has. It's got special features, and one of these features, as Microsoft would say, features, but it is built into this thing, it's so fast at encrypting files. It's so fast and so efficient at encrypting files. So, so this is from Cyber Social, and we see a lot of stuff coming out in the morning from Cyber Social. They're doing a pretty good job of keeping good, concise articles out there. So Conti ransomware is using up to 32 simultaneous CPU threads to encrypt files on infected systems at a super fast encryption speed. One of the things that's interesting about Conti is, as the article states, it's human operated. So somebody's driving this thing. Somebody's running the exploit. So after they get the intrusion, they being the attacker gets the intrusion, then someone manually goes in and conducts this operation through manual actions. So the article lays out some unique features of ransomware. One is it uses the Windows Restart Manager to ensure that all the files are encrypted. It leverages some command line options while scanning for data on targeted systems, suggesting that there's a human controlling it, so it's running different switches. And this entails skipping of the encryption of local files and really looking for those SMB shares to encrypt the shares instead. Boasts having multiple anti-analysis attributes to slow down detection and reverse engineering attempts, and it has the ability of causing targeted damage in an environment to disrupt incident response activities. So there's a lot of things that indicate that this is a person behind a keyboard that's running this thing, that's managing this thing, unless it's some type of advanced AI, but I don't see that. Big point, the article goes on to detail why abusing the Windows Restart Manager is important. And really, the manager can be used to open and close certain files to make sure that they are encrypted. Jolly. I've always been an advocate for the government to competitively compensate these sharp cyber warriors. I agree with you. It's hard. I mean, when I was in the government, they were always struggling with, why can't we keep qualified people? And some people do it. And I know a lot of people have do it or have done it for the pure fact of, selfless service, doing it to protect the government, doing it, working in cyber within the government to protect the government, to protect our country. A lot of people are in it for those reasons, not the money. It's not always about the money, and it shouldn't be always about the money, because there's plenty of money to be made in this field. It's you're gonna have to put your time and energy into staying up on top of things. So it shouldn't always be about the money. The other thing, that people don't understand is it's hard to get a job in the government. So many times qualified people can't get in the government for one reason or another. One, the hiring process is archaic and incredibly slow. Months to get hired on. So someone transitioning from the military probably can do that. Because they can wait months, because maybe they'll start applying months before they get out. But most people in cyber are, if they're a contractor or a consultant, maybe their contract's up and they've got a couple weeks to get to work. They don't have months to wait. They don't have months and months to wait. The other thing is, there's a lot of people out there that are really skilled, that have done maybe some not the smartest things in their past. And that's probably how they learned the skill set they've got is, doing some of these things that aren't so smart. And sometimes that bars these people from working in the field in the government. Sometimes it bars them from most private sector jobs as well. That's just a fact of life, unfortunately. That's why we say, when you're training, when you're learning this stuff, don't attack live systems. There are plenty of labs. You can build your own lab for next to nothing anymore. Either that or leverage the reservists and the National Guard more. True, but obviously that comes at a cost as well. Let's say you're in the reserves and you're working in one of these organizations that does this. and you kind of signed up for the 2 weeks a month, 2 days a month, 2 weeks a year, kind of thing. That's what they really promote in the Guard and the Reserve. Help your country, but you do it two weeks a month, 2 days a month, man, 2 weeks a year, and then you start activating these people, and some places don't have like their business, the place they work for don't true up that money that they make. Maybe their bill is set for a certain amount of money. Like out here in DC, it's expensive to live out here, and to go back, to get activated as a reservist or a guardsman, you're talking about going from probably over 100,000 a year to well under 100,000 a year. You're talking about, depending on how long these, and I would assume they'd have to be some kind of deployments. Maybe just leverage them on the weekend, maybe. But if it's activating them and putting them to work full time, it's going to be hard to keep people in the Guard and Reserve then too, because then they start losing out. It's a tough one. I think that's a good point. Leverage Guard and Reserve more. But even when I was in the reserves, it was hard to align even with an Army organization, let alone trying to align with some other organization. It's tough to challenge. I think that's a really good idea. But how many missions do those Guard units already have? Those Guard and Reserve units. They're probably, if they're a Guard unit, they're probably part of the state CERT. I'm going to guess most of them. There's probably some IOC or Information Operations Command units. I don't even know how that's structured anymore. And then the Reserve probably has Information Operations Command units as well, or IO units. So I'm not sure what their daily mission is, what their mission is. And again, think about it. They've only got those 2 days a month, and then again the 2 weeks a year, plus all the normal things they have. Yeah, I think maybe that's part of the key or part of the answer is leveraging the Guard and Reserve. So back to our current story. This Conti is definitely a ransomware attack we need to look out for. It looks like it's going to lock everything up. It uses the restart mechanism to ensure that all files are locked up. And they're saying currently there's no way to reverse the encryption, so you're stuck paying for it. And again, it's not doing local files; it's doing those SMB shares. So it's doing your network shares. It's what's locking up. So unless you have some offline backups, you may be stuck paying the piper on that one. It's definitely not a good thing. I have so many things up. So this is what we tie back to the earlier story. The House Republicans introduced legislation to strengthen federal cybersecurity. This one's a little closer. A representative Republican, John Katko from New York, on Monday introduced 3 pieces of legislation designed to improve cybersecurity at the national level, particularly within the Department of Homeland Security. This is from an article from The Hill. The proposed bill would help bolster leadership at DHS's Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Again, I'm going to watch my mouth out now. One of the key federal agencies involved in addressing cybersecurity threats. One of the things it's going to do is going to take the director and assistant directors act, and would elevate the position of CISA director and give the job a 5-year term, along with reclassifying assistant director positions. This is probably it's maybe moving them up the pay scale, unless they're at the top already. Another problem with the government is the structured pay scale. This 5-year term, and probably giving them more clout to do what they need to do. The second bill would give CISA the ability to conduct comprehensive review of its operations to help improve coordination and transparency. And a third would establish a talent exchange program between CISA and the private sector. And we've seen this between some organizations in the government and private sector in the past. So, so it's increasing the status, maybe increasing the pay of the director and the deputy directors of CISA. It's going to be a comprehensive review to help improve coordination and transparency, which is what we talked about in that first article. And the third would be a talent exchange program between CISA and the private sector. That may be a way to go about this too, is doing that. I've seen places before that have kind of an exchange program with the government, and normally in those situations, the organization that's sponsoring the exchange continues to pay that person at their current level, which makes it much harder to get these positions than you would think. So CATCO is the ranking member of the House Homeland Cybersecurity Subcommittee. He says in a statement, the time for a nation to take cybersecurity seriously is far overdue. Looking at a bunch of attacks, he points out a bunch of attacks. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, American business and governments, as well as individuals working from home, have experienced significant uptick in cyber attacks. As a nation, it's clear we must do better to prepare for and respond to these attacks. Cato introduced the 3 bills following the publication of the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission report in March, created by Congress and charged with laying out recommendations for defending the nation against cyber threats. Another recommendation from the group, which is made up of members of Congress, federal organizations, and industry leaders, was the establishment of the National Cybersecurity Director, something we talked about last week. So this is really these 2 pieces. I know these aren't attack malware or some things we normally talk about, but I think keep an eye on this legislation is important. I think they're laying out the future of what cybersecurity is going to look like. There's changes coming. There's changes coming across the board. I've seen since I've moved out to the private sector, in the financials, the pharmaceutical areas, more and more movement towards government-like structures. And while things like the risk management framework is not required in the private sector, we're seeing more requirements like Special Publication 800-171 that requires a NIST-like approach to controls. The cybersecurity framework, or CSF, is being pushed and leveraged dramatically in many of the areas of critical infrastructure as kind of edict requires it to be done. So we may see a significantly different cybersecurity world in 3 to 5 years. It could be dramatically different with this interaction between the federal government, and I'm assuming state government as well, and private sector. We've really got to be coordinated. We've really got to share information. We've got to use the resources we have to defend the country, and it's just a fact of life. So that's coming from the House of Representatives. The next one is pretty short. So our friend TikTok is back in the news. Wells Fargo is the most recent one that have deemed TikTok a risk. I don't know if Mike Brown was on this morning. He might not be. TikTok, there's a lot of worry about TikTok and the information it's gathering, what it's doing with that information. We know from the article yesterday, it's supposed to have servers. TikTok is supposed to have servers based in the United States. They do, but it's also sending information back to China. Obviously, this company is called ByteDance that created this. more than likely a government, government sponsored, government sanctioned, maybe government run tool. But again, it's one of those things. So the spokesperson from Wells Fargo said a small number of employees with corporate-owned devices who had installed TikTok application due to concerns about TikTok privacy and security controls and practices, and because corporate-owned devices should be used for company business only, we've decided that those employees need to remove the app from their devices. So again, this is kind of what we've seen in the past. It's really hard to tell people not to run TikTok on their device that they own, the piece of equipment that they own. And obviously this is one of the things we do with our family, friends, our coworkers. We let them know the risks of these things, but we can't make them uninstall it. We can't make them remove it. And again, it's one of those things, it's a time suck. It's going to grab time and you use time up. But bigger than that, it's this information that's being taken, this information that's leaving. We don't know what we're doing with it. We don't know how it's being processed or how it's being used. So, in my opinion, TikTok, it's one of the things that probably should not be installed, not be used, for a number of reasons. Just it takes up time. It takes your time, and it's probably harvesting your information and sending it off to a country that is not very, very fond of us. So, not going to spend a lot of time there. There's a new report out, a survey. It's calling 2020 the year of increased attack sophistication. This is from HelpNet Security. So they're increased in both cyber attack volume and breaches during the past 12 months. The U.S. has prompted an increased investment in cyber defense, with U.S. businesses already using an average more than 9 different cybersecurity tools. The survey from VMware found. The survey, this article lays out a bunch of different statistics from the survey. 88% of North America. Hold on a second. All right, there we go. 88% of all North American respondents stated that they had seen an increase in overall cyber attacks as a result of employees working from home. So other key points from this survey are 92% said that attack volumes have increased in the last 12 months. 97% said their business has suffered from a security breach in the last 12 months. 84% said attacks have become more sophisticated. 95% say they plan to increase cyber defense spending in the coming years. OS vulnerabilities are the leading cause of breaches, followed by web application and ransomware attacks. And U.S. companies say they're using an average of 9 different security tools to manage this. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. OS breaches still lead the charge. I think they have some percentage. Let me find the percentages here. So here's the common breaches in the United States. 27% of attacks from the survey were OS breaches, operating system breaches. Anyone know what's in that mug? I'm gonna tell you, it's illy coffee, but it should need maybe it needs a shot of Jameson. I don't know. Maybe that would keep me going. But good point, Alex. We need something in there. So operating system vulnerabilities are still leading the charge. And what's that mean to you and me? I mean, that means, and this is 27% of all breaches from the survey. Generally, and this is a generalization, but this is from what I've seen, if you have an OS breach, many times it's because it's a patching issue. It means you haven't patched that OS. That's the majority of the exploits I've seen come from a breach in an OS through a vulnerability that was known and that there's available patch. There's a patch available, and it just wasn't put in place in time. So that means we, when these, to blunt these attacks, to stop these attacks, we patch our system. That's number one. So if Mike Bravo was here, he'd say, number one, you got to know, know what equipment you have, know what hardware you have. Number two, know what your software you have. That way you can know what you need to patch. So, web application attacks, 13.5%. Pretty strong too. And those web application attacks are tough because those are applications normally you're pointing out towards the internet. So obviously those are difficult to defend. We need to be diligent with making sure we're using secure coding practices when we build these applications. We need to make sure that there's code review done and some type of at least automated scanning of the code, if not manual and automated pen testing, to make sure there's no holes. And we see, I'm amazed when we look at code, we look at web applications, and there's serious flaws in things like not sanitizing user input, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, buffer overflows. These are all things we should not have at all in code that we're putting out there, let alone code we're putting out there that's going to face the internet. We got to do a better job of that. We just got to do a better job. Ransomware, 13%. We all know that. There's, ransomware distributed by phishing attempts, ransomware distributed by breaches, ransomware distributed by malware like viruses, worms, Trojans. That's huge. Ransomware is huge, and it's going to keep going because there's a lot of money in locking up people's data. And the last one, they say, 5% island hopping. And this is a new term to me. I don't know if you guys have been exposed to this term before. But island hopping is kind of like watering hole attacks. And it's a catchy term. But if we think about this, the way that the United States moved around in World War II, especially in the Pacific, was by capturing smaller islands and jumping from island to island, moving towards the mainland of Japan. So it's island hopping technique, not attacking Japan directly, but attacking smaller islands to move closer to Japan, is the same thing that we see here. That term has been kind of reused, repackaged for the cyber world, and it really means it's this watering hole attacks, where if I can attack a website that I know your users go to, and I can put malware on there that I know they're going to click on, or if I can attack your supply chain, I don't attack the company directly as an attacker, but I attack organizations and things around the corporation or the organization I'm trying to attack, and I island hop. I go from one to other. I build watering hole attacks on sites that I know your users are going to go to. I maybe try to attack your supply chain, second and third party supply chain, because I know their defenses are weaker than yours. And if I can exploit them, I can use that as a way into your company or into your organization. So island hopping, it's an interesting concept. So Rick McElroy, who's a cybersecurity strategist at VMware's Carbon Black, said island hopping is having an increased impact with 11% of respondents citing it as the main cause in combination with other third-party risks such as third-party apps and supply chain. It's clear the extended enterprise is under pressure. When we think about the extended enterprise, is really the organization we control, the thing we can put our controls on, things where we can control what's going on. And then the extended organization is those things like supply chain, those places we get equipment, software, personnel from. If those can be exploited and they're easier to exploit, they're lower hanging fruit, that still is a way into our organization. Even though we don't control them, we can't do that. We can't make them do anything. We can make them be compliant with certain requirements. Maybe in our contracting requirements or our contracting language, we can define certain things that require maybe that they're compliant with something like FedRAMP or SAS or something like that. But it's a common breach. So cyber attacks getting smarter and smarter. And then last in the lineup of the news is Microsoft, right? So Microsoft has a DNS vulnerability. This is CVE 2020-1350. It's dubbed SIG-RED by Checkpoint. 17-year-old remote code execution. Really, this is using exploiting DNS queries and really forcing the DNS server to go query that top-level domain, and then it's being redirected to a malicious domain that's sending a buffer overflow back to the DNS server that is overloading the buffer, and maybe in extreme cases causing remote code execution, right? So this is important because if an attacker can leverage and take out the DNS server, can overwrite files, can repoint DNS records to malicious sites, that's a way, of course, into the organization. So that's one of the things we want to watch out for is if we think sometimes DNS is not that important. It's just repointing IP addresses to common names or common names to IP addresses. It's critically important because if I have a user base that's normally going to a site and they're looking that DNS record up, and maybe it's not being stored in the host file. Maybe we have systems that are being rebuilt all the time. Users go DNS, they get that name resolved to an IP address. If that DNS server has been exploited and that IP address is really the IP address of a malicious site, now we're redirecting our users to a malicious site. They're getting that malicious code download or whatever the bad guys decided to do. So yeah, the patch is available. We need to patch it. Cybersecurity researchers today disclosed that this new highly critical vulnerability is Wormable, and what all that means is it can be packaged inside of a worm and being executed automatically. So you don't need user interaction to initiate this worm, to initiate the exploitation. So we can put it inside a worm. Doesn't need user interaction. It's going to exploit the vulnerability, hopefully exploit the server, hopefully from the attacker's point of view, exploit the server, and then the next step is the attacker moving on to their next step, probably rewriting DNS records and waiting for users to query those sites and implant malicious code, and then move on to the network, pivot around, do what they need to do, and get data out, encrypt files, whatever their intent is. CVSS scale, the CVSS scale for this without local variables is a 10 out of 10. Again, so this is like yesterday when we talked about F5, right? It's bad. It's a bad thing. So there's some mitigations, but there's also a patch. So just patch it. So it's going out with the July patch Tuesday. That includes another 122 patches for vulnerabilities, with a total 18 flaws listed as critical and 105 as important. No evidence that this bug is being actively exploited by attackers yet, but it's obviously not a good thing. So that's what's going on with Microsoft today. Takes us to the bottom of the show, where we get to talk about fun things like what is today. Today is National Hot Dog Day, and let's see, the third Wednesday in July is National Hot Dog Day. What's in a hot dog? Don't ask. Yeah. So National Hot Dog Day and the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council created this day and holds annual hot dog lunch in Washington, D.C. Not sure if they're doing it with COVID. Established holiday the third Wednesday of the month. No documents determining that it's national, but in our link, we did throw some links in there where you get National Hot Dog Day deals, including money off hot dogs. I don't think there's any. Oh yeah, Love's Travel Stops is giving a free hot dog or roller grill with a coupon. They've linked to the coupons there. Flying J, Pilot Flying J are giving them as well. and then there's a bunch of discounts. And then some facts about hot dogs. So in 2015, nearly 1 billion pounds of hot dogs were sold at retail stores. That's about 2.5 billion spent on hot dogs in America. A bunch more information in there in the link. Don't need to really stress on that too much. And finally, not least important, but definitely last, tonight is trivia night starting at 7 p.m. East Coast time, running for about an hour. Of course, it's free. More information can be found at cyber-recon.com/trivia, including where to get the application to be used to play the game, as well as how it's going to go, what you need to do. Obviously, no money. You don't need to pay for anything. We don't need your personal information. Socrative may ask some personal information if you use the app, but if you're using the website, they're not going to ask any personal information. So how it works is you log on right here to YouTube. You'll watch the live stream. The live stream will ask questions, and then you'll answer through the Socrative either webpage or app, depending on how you want to play it. The app does work pretty well. That's up to you if you want to install that. If you use the webpage, you don't have to install anything. It just runs from the webpage. You don't give up any personal information, of course. That's important to us. And it's pretty fun. We just take about an hour, go through about 40 questions. Tonight we have a new one called, section called Without My Glasses, where you're going to have to figure out either something that you can't quite make out because it's a little blurry, or something where something's missing from an image, and you have to figure out what it is. And of course, the normal cybersecurity questions. And obviously, Without My Glasses is dedicated to IT and cybersecurity items, whether they're in pop culture or in IT itself. Tonight we have a whole section on cloud security too. So if you're a cloud security guru, might be the night for you to come out. So that being said, as Mike Bravo would say, go get some. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button right over there. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live. That way you'll know when we're going live for trivia night tonight. And every morning we go live at 7:30 for a Cup of Cyber, where we talk about the cyber news of the day. The other thing we have coming up is the RMF class. It is self-paced, but if you guys know, we run the first class, and this is going to be RMF 2.0. Every time we run the first class, we have interactive sessions, and the class is released a block at a time so that everybody can go through the block. Then we can have the interactive session. It is self-paced, so you can go through those blocks as quickly or as slowly as you want. After this first run is the only one you're going to get the chance to have these interactive live sessions where we talk about the content, we talk about the program, we even talk about working in RMF and the CAP certification. It's a fun time. Learning is sometimes tough, so try to make it as fun as possible. Multimodal, meaning that it's available written, video, exercise, hands-on. We're going to work through all that, covering RMF 2.0, including the new prepare step. So that launches on Monday the 20th. You can pre-register and get a discount at cyber-recon.com. But anyways, that's the salesmanship for now. Love to see you tonight for trivia night. Obviously, no cost at all, no commitment at all. Show up. You might win a prize. It's a fun time. I always have a good time out there. That being said, I'd say we cut this and get ready for the workday. Thanks for everyone for being here this morning. Thanks for talking with me. Thanks for your attention and sharing your insight. If you're watching later in the day, hope we see you tonight for trivia night, and hopefully this helps you some. So until next time, until tomorrow, be good out there, be safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.